First, I'd like to take a moment to say that I'm not a religious kind of a person. I don't like to enter temples and mosques and chapels, but this space, I'm grateful to the organizers for allowing me to share this moment with kindred spirits to the same cause. Uh, I named my talk after Aldous Huxley's book from 1938, where he presented 60 drawings made by school children from Spain around the ages of 8 to 14 during the time of the Spanish Civil War. The title, They Still Draw Pictures, becomes antipodal to Theodore Adorno's famous proclamation from 1951 that there can be no poetry after Auschwitz, or that writing poetry after the genocide in Hitler's Europe is barbaric, was barbaric. Huxley put it rather simply, that up until the age of 14, at least 50% of the children were sort of geniuses in the realm of art. When they reached adulthood, however, that number rapidly declined to something like 1 in a million. These paintings done by children are vivid, sometimes terribly emotional in the face of tremendous difficulties, but they're never morbid. Children draw what they perceive in a very direct and natural way. I name my talk such because I believe that these children drew these scenes not out of a sense of an aesthetic purpose, but because in the moment of the drawing, they lived that moment and held it in their little palms with all the intensity that life offered them. In my talk today, I present a collection of scattered ideas that I'm trying to bring together perhaps rather tenuously. These are almost like sketches or vignettes themselves. What I would like to discover is the nature of drawing itself, or rather the architecture of it. And a little later, that idea may turn into architecture itself as a form of drawing. And finally, I will end with a proposition that we ourselves are perhaps no more or no less than a kind of drawing, incomplete and imperfect. I apologize in advance if the ramblings are not particularly useful in practical life. I think the talk before mine could not be more practical. But I hope it can alter ever so slightly the motivations to pick up that pencil and allow it to wander on a piece of paper. So as a child, I never liked to draw snakes. And in fact, I now believe that no child ever does. We did a lot of these as kids. I think every sculptor's journey begins with a rolled snake. Am I right? So it's not as if the subject is too repulsive. Children just find it hard to draw snakes. Why is that? At best, it turns out looking like an earthworm. Nandalal Bose, my grandfather's teacher at Shantiniketan, would ask his students to express the difference between drawing a snake and drawing a rope. The difference between one and the other is in the mind, he would say. You just have to think you are drawing a snake and the snake will appear. When you think of the snake while drawing, your hand moves differently in an action that only your body knows. Slow at first, then rapidly with an acceleration and a flourish at the tail. The rope, on the other hand, is lifeless and needs none of that animation or acceleration. It is almost as if the hand becomes the snake at the moment of the drawing on the paper. It's an interesting thought if you stop to consider that the drawing becomes the thing itself. The act of drawing in the age of computer-aided drawing, or CAD, is not the same. There is a distance between the object and the person drawing. The direct conversation between the author and the emerging object is mediated. It is like taking a translator along on your date or your honeymoon. The love is lost. And I speak of love not just as a metaphor. The love between the author and the object is a matter of interest to this discussion. I'd like to quote John Haydock, who says, "A house knows who loves it." And again, the breath of a house is the sound of voices within. And a house is suspicious when an armoire is introduced in an unfulfilled room. A house closes its eyes when it is being renovated. The project for the House of the Suicide and the House of the Mother of the Suicide was inspired by the death in 1969 of a Prague University student who died after setting himself on fire to protest the Soviet invasions and the occupation of his native Czechoslovakia. Observe the anthropomorphic or human-like quality of his architecture. Another example, the Kreuzberg apartments in Berlin. In the period following modernism, we seem to have lost this attitude to the object in our own work, the buildings becoming more abstract, less personal, our houses are mere boxes to live in. Our drawings now become explanatory rather than exploratory. They are miniature versions of the buildings and designs that would be produced. They have become abstract and diagrammatic and scientific. Our obsession with precision and exactitude translates into our work where our attention to inaccuracies and misalignments takes center stage. Those of us who use CAD would know just how frustrating that visual is. Or this. The modern belief that representations of architecture, particularly the drawing and the model, are mere reductions, produces an architecture culture where abstraction and precision are fetishized. Our drawings then become tools to a larger objective. They become a means towards gaining control, a product of power and efficacy. This is a drawing of Baron Haussmann's plan for cutting across the old fabric of 19th century Paris to create straight boulevards to control the proletarian revolution with cannon fire, what has since been infamously called the Haussmannization of Paris. But drawing is also a process, a truer representation of an uncertainty. It embodies the real force behind our emotions, which our rational brains eventually flatten into some kind of resolution. In a way, architecture itself is a drawing, an unfinished project which we continue to complete with our lives. Take, for example, Piranesi's incredible Carcheri etchings in their various chronological stages. Each stage proffers a very different reading of the space. Whereas the first is an exploration of scales and ambitions, the second is an exploration of depth and light. Objects introduced create additional layers to the space. This is an imagination of a space without rest. The notion of a prison, or Carceri, as an antithesis to home, the place of rest. In my own project at the terminal at Lucknow, I was quite happy when the building was under construction. It came to this stage. I did not want it to proceed further. At this point, the building had appropriately captured the emotions that we hoped would find expression in the design. The state of anxiety of every terrestrial human at being projected into the air at 800 kilometers an hour. The state of being awed while climbing the steps to a 400-ton metal vessel that rests its entire weight on 3 circular legs. The wonder of a takeoff, the nightmares of a crash. In my heart, I honestly did not want the finish of a completed building that would perhaps take away from the rawness of these emotions. I think that is the potency of architecture that Gordon Matta Clark was trying to find through his work. The son of artists, Gordon Matta Clark studied architecture at Cornell University, but never practiced architecture in the conventional sense. Matta Clark died of pancreatic cancer at the age of 35. In his work, he's interrogating the relationship between art and place, between inside and outside, between intention and circumstance. But more specific to this talk, I think he's fundamentally challenging the idea of the creative work as a finished product, as an end. It is not an endorsement of the incomplete, but the acceptance of the creative work as that which resists completion. The power of the incomplete and the ruin, which is at once a state of being beyond complete and less than complete, is in the idea of transcending authorship. It is in the idea of relinquishing original intentions and the work gathering meaning over time beyond the control of its author. And the power of his works lie in an order that transcends the limitations of rationality and the present. I believe his work leaves an order to be discovered by each in their own way, like a poem that is arcane and haunting. Architecture assumes the potential of a drawing. Okay, I'm going to skip this and come back to it. Potential of a drawing when the purpose of a work is to work out nuances for a larger project. Take, for instance, Edwin Lutyens and his earlier commissions, which become models for his later works. The scope of these little structures is far more ambitious than for the purpose they were built. Each has the possibility of becoming monumental in scale, and many of them did get built at grander scales. Architecture also resembles a drawing when the scale of a building is purposely concealed, like in Taj Mahal, for example, where you can't tell, even when you're very close, how tall the building really is. It is taller than the Qutub Minar in Delhi, for example, and we don't even realize it. Built reality here is alluding to something larger, or something smaller, or something that has no dimension. It is of a cosmic scale where time, not distance, becomes the unit of dimension. I will end by narrating the gist of a short story by Jorge Luis Borges called The Circular Ruins. A man trained in astronomy, anatomy, and magic arrives at the ruins of a circular temple amidst a tropical rainforest. His purpose is to dream a person into existence, a person who would be as perfect physically as he would be as a student, who would be respectful but also dare to challenge the teacher every now and then. The man spends most of his time sleeping, dreaming each part into existence, part by part, fighting insomnia and failure, the fervor of his efforts and his supplication to the gods bear fruit finally. In his dream, he is able to create the perfect man, his son with each anatomical part, each hair dreamt to perfection. His creation, his son, his ideal student, is finally ready and is able to carry out every task he gives him. The man fears, however, the moment of his son's realization that his existence is but the outcome of someone else's dream. The realization that he is no more than a phantom and therefore not real. And so, the man wipes away all memory from his son's mind of the process of his own creation and the training thereafter. He then sends him away to another part of the jungle, to a distant ruin. His task completed, the man lives out his years in part boredom and in part ecstasy of his achievements, until the day when the temple he lives in is consumed by fire. He finds that the fire does not harm him, and thereby realizes in relief, in terror, and in utter humiliation that he himself is also the product of someone else's dreams. A fascinating and surreal story that perhaps puts into perspective the reality we consider so seriously. The priorities we establish over what is real and what is imagined, what becomes manifest reality and what remains an idea, perfect and inviolate. What do our drawings mean when we ourselves are works in progress? A drawing in the process of completion by forces outside of us. What do our projects mean when we are ourselves as transient as our dreams? The drawing is the moment when we find that we exist, where we become the snake, the house, or the ruin. The object of our dreams comes alive, and the drawing becomes the thing itself. Thank you.